In California, the worst measles outbreak in 15 years is spreading.
The virus is roaring back into the headlines tonight. An outbreak somehow traced to
someone who had probably caught measles abroad visited Disneyland and may have sneezed.
Measles on the march in America.
This outbreak is showing no signs of letting up. There are already more cases this year than there were.
The number tripled to 644 measles cases reported in 27 states.
And I mean, is this all basically because of the anti-vaccination movement, because parents aren't vaccinating their kids?
Yeah, you know, I think so.
A bill that would ban exemptions from childhood vaccines is advancing through the California legislature.
We are authoring legislation that will abolish the personal belief exemption.
I think you're starting to see why it is that mandates are so important.
There has been some inaccurate information circulating about vaccines, mostly stemming from a British study linking vaccines to autism.
We still continue to hear that vaccine caused autism, even though that's been debunked.
Repeatedly and thoroughly debunked.
You may have heard vaccination causes autism in 1 out of 110 children. Fuck that. Total bullshit. It doesn't.
The bill requiring children to be vaccinated has passed with bipartisan support. Every child must meet immunization standards before joining public schools, private schools, and daycares.
I would strongly encourage everybody, look at the science, look at the facts. CDC, the Center for Disease Control, can give you good information. Get your children vaccinated.
I have waited a long time to tell my story, and I want to tell it truthfully. I was involved in deceiving millions of taxpayers regarding the potential negative side effects of vaccines. We lied about the scientific findings. The CDC can no longer be trusted to do vaccine safety work, can't be trusted to be transparent. The CDC can't be trusted to police itself. William W. Thompson, Senior Scientist, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
My son, Stephen, was born in February of 1998. Steve, what does the cow say?
Tweet, tweet.
Doggy. 2 weeks after his 15-month vaccines, then he lost all language. He lost all eye contact. You'd pick him up and he would just hang limp. This is a time where CDC was just starting to do these studies on vaccines and autism. And I was contacting the CDC and was deeply critical of their studies. And so the CDC decided that the scientist who was going to interface with me at that time was Dr. William Thompson. I received a letter from a CDC attorney in 2004 saying that I was no longer permitted to contact the CDC. Fast forwarding to 2014, Thompson said to me, Brian, if you listen to me and if you do what I tell you to do, I can guarantee you will be able to access a treasure trove of data, and I would like to guide you through these steps.
So I want to be a resource. I want to be valuable to you. I want you to have someone in the system.
For years, I had been trying to crack this edifice of the CDC and just getting little glimpses of what was not right.
The CDC has put the research 10 years behind. Because the CDC has not been transparent, we've missed 10 years of research because the CDC is so paralyzed right now by anything related to autism.
I am a licensed clinical psychologist and a board-certified behavior analyst. In 1978, I want to say the prevalence of autism was about 1 in 15,000 children. It was a very rare disorder. I was working at a clinic at UCLA, which was pretty much the only known center for treating children with autism, and we had maybe 6 to 10 children who we were working with. Somewhere around the early 90s, shortly after I opened CARD, the growth of autism has been so high and so rapid that I've never felt like I could ever catch up anymore. From an official diagnostic perspective, the way that we define autism, we were looking at deficits in two areas. The first is social communication and social interaction. And in that area, we require 3 specific symptoms to be present. Symptoms such as no social emotional reciprocity, no non-verbal communication, that means eye contact, for instance, or no development of relationships. The second required area of deficit is the presence of stereotypic, repetitive, restricted behaviors. And these are things like hand flapping, body rocking, insistence on routines being the same. One of the new additions is the presence of a sensory dysregulation. If a child has an inability to sense things correctly, not necessarily hearing things the way we do, that could be classified as a symptom of autism.
We begin, though, as always, keeping them honest. Breaking news tonight, just hours ago, the British medical journal BMJ did something extremely rare for a scientific journal. It accused a researcher, Andy Wakefield, of outright fraud.
I got a call on the 19th of May 1995 from a mother telling me the story of her child, his regression into autism following a vaccine. And I said, "How can I help you? I know nothing about autism. You've come through to the wrong number." And she said, "No, doctor, my child has terrible gastrointestinal issues and no one will take them seriously." I was an academic gastroenterologist doing research with a particular interest in Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease. I knew nothing whatsoever about autism. When I was at medical school, it was so rare, we weren't taught about it. We heard a succession of stories which were very, very similar. Medicine is about pattern recognition, and there was a clear pattern emerging. So we decided, a group of us, including the world's leading pediatric gastroenterologists at the time, led by Professor John Walker-Smith, decided that these children merited thorough investigation. And what we discovered and reported for the first time was this link between what appeared to be a novel type of intestinal inflammation and autistic regression in previously developmentally normal children. And among those, the majority had regressed into autism, according to their parents, following the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. It wasn't our place to censor their story because it may be uncomfortable for public health. Our job was to report that story accurately in order that it might lead to further investigation. And the paper explicitly said, this paper does not prove an association between MMR vaccine and the syndrome described. More work is needed to resolve this issue. That was the conclusion of the paper.
As an investigative medical journalist, I've spent the last 7 years working on one of the best medical talk shows in the world. We know in medicine that there have been many, many studies proving that vaccines do not cause autism. But the problem I have always had with that is thousands and thousands of parents all telling the same story. My child got a vaccine, usually the MMR vaccine, and then that night or the next day broke out in a fever. And then when they came out of the fever, lost speech, lost the ability to walk, basically regressed into what we know as autism and never came back.
Bella was born, and that was a wonderful experience.
Bella was just this angelic, perfect child. She hit all her milestones. I got pregnant with Billy quite quickly.
Bella, say hello to Billy.
Hello. We've now got a beautiful girl and a beautiful boy. Life was just amazing. So at 2, 4 and 6 months, Billy had his normal baby vaccines. A little bit snivelly, chesty, coldy after maybe the last one. So me, in my perfect mother mode, rushed to the doctor. Is he okay? Do I need to give him anything? Yes, you need to give him antibiotics, just to make sure there's not an infection in there. It didn't clear up. Rushing back to the doctor, we need some more antibiotics. Let's just keep this going in him. And I remember my mother calling me out. My mother's a sort of homeopathic hippie, and calling me out saying, "What are you doing? You're chucking loads of antibiotics down your son. For what?" And I remember saying to her, "Mum, with all due respect, you're an artist, and they're doctors, so they know best." He was due his MMR vaccination at 12 months. So the morning, exactly to the day, my friend, she said to me, "Listen, I've heard that there may be a problem with this vaccine we're about to take Billy for, the MMR. And I said, are you crazy? What is the matter with you? If there was a problem with vaccination, it would be headline news. The doctor would be calling me up saying, do not bother coming in. This is not a safe vaccine. None of that is happening. You're being negative, you're being careless, and you're listening to, what, some rumour that you heard somewhere. Billy could become deaf if I don't take him in now and get him this MMR.
You know, most of the evidence linking measles with autism is kind of settled down, and most of the doctors and scientists agree that it probably isn't the major cause.
I've been working in pediatrics for almost 20 years. I think most pediatricians view vaccines as the #1 thing they do for kids.
Okay, there we go. And a high one.
All right. Okay. I'm young enough to not remember the days of kids in an iron lung because they were battling polio. You know, polio has essentially been eradicated from this country. In '98, the Wakefield study came out. My son had just been born. That study kind of pointed a finger at the MMR. As a parent, I was scared to give the MMR to my son. And as a matter of fact, I didn't give it to him on time because I wanted to see what additional studies would show. And over time, additional studies did show that, no, it's safe. And so he did get the vaccine.
The day Billy got the MMR was a living nightmare. It's the worst day of my life, to be honest with you.
I came in and I saw him lying in his cot, listless. He started this uncontrollable shaking. Imagine coming out of a frozen pond.
His eyes were doing this and he was shaking like this.
And I remember she grasped him and held him really tight to her chest.
There's immediate fear in John and there's immediate, Mummy, this is not going to happen. I don't know what is wrong with you, but this is not going to happen. And we get to hospital, we rush him in, doctors are coming in and looking at him, and that's when they said, he's had a reaction, he's had a seizure, this is normal, this is common for many, many children who have this vaccination. It's absolutely okay, he's going to be fine. Nobody ever told me that there would be any side effect to any of the vaccinations for my children.
Following his febrile convulsion that he had the same day of the MMR, we were told to take him home.
He slept in the bed with us for the night. He seemed just very, very sleepy. In fact, he didn't really ever wake up to the Billy that we had before.
For me, it became really necessary to start looking at what types of medical issues are these children going through? What are the other factors that have affected them, that have brought them to this level of symptomology that we call autism? This is now probably the mid-90s. I came to notice that there was a very high use of antibiotics amongst these children. But B, what became pretty interesting was seeing the number of families who were reporting that their child had a regressive type of behavior occur right after their vaccinations. A lot of these parents were showing me footage of their children who had been completely developing normally until 18 months, and then all of a sudden post-vaccination had developed incredible regression. Children who had speech anywhere close to 50 to 100 words and had completely lost all of their words. Children who were extremely attached and interactive with their parents and had suddenly become isolated, no longer responding to their own name. And this was all happening right after their MMR vaccines.
My oldest son, Ian, was born normal, developing normally. He was this beautiful boy, and we ended up at our 12-month visit, which is his 1 year. Then they gave him multiple vaccines at once. And within 7 days, he had 104 fever and a rash all over his body. He had previously been noted in our videos, home videos, that he was walking and actually running at that point. 7 days after the vaccine, he was no longer able to do that. He was falling down. He became a really sick little boy.
So the question for those of us investigating autism is age of exposure to MMR a risk for autism? And in order to understand why that might be, you have to understand something of the history of MMR vaccine. In 1987, there was an MMR vaccine that was being used in Canada, produced by SmithKline Beecham. And that vaccine caused meningitis. It was recognized quickly, and that vaccine was withdrawn in Canada. However, in the same month that it was withdrawn in Ontario, it was licensed in the UK. The name was simply changed from Trivirix to Pluzirix. In the UK, it was used for 4 years, and likewise, it caused meningitis and had to be rapidly withdrawn. There was a public outcry. There was an acute loss of confidence by the public in vaccine policymakers, and the vaccine should, at that point, have been destroyed. It wasn't. It was then shipped to developing countries like Brazil, where it was used in a mass vaccination campaign. And there was an epidemic of meningitis, which was entirely predictable. Now, scientists studied that epidemic, and what they found is that the risk for meningitis was associated with age of exposure. The younger you got the MMR vaccine, the greater the risk of meningitis. For people like me investigating autism, the question was, is there a similar risk in autism? Is age of exposure to MMR a risk for autism just as it was for meningitis? We shared with the US Congress and the CDC the hypothesis.
The story as told to us, at which we have an obligation to report, is that the majority of children regressed following a period of normal development in the face of MMR vaccination. That does not mean it is the cause of the disease.
The Institute of Medicine is a body of scientists and physicians that review the available data on vaccine safety and then advise our government on vaccine research policy. Well, because Andy Wakefield had put forth this theory that the age at which you receive the MMR may increase your risk of autism, the IOM looked to the CDC to do that very study. It was a study about timing. Does the earlier you receive the MMR vaccine increase the risk of autism?
When we talk about the MMR study, nobody had ever requested those data because it was a big secret that you could do it.
They don't really want people to know that this data exists. Again.
You get checked in England with your babies at certain times by health visitors. So at 9 months, Billy had his full-blown check, and it says no parental concerns, baby laughing, babbling, talking. So we passed that with flying colours. 18 months is when they next come in. And by this time, we know there's something seriously wrong with Billy.
Probably within 5 or 6 days, the first signs really was this vacancy. He wasn't the same smiley little baby that he was before. He had a blank expression. Then the diarrhea kicked in.
His tummy started to get bigger and bigger, bloated, rock hard bloated tummy. He would start to walk on tiptoes, and then came the head banging, the constant banging against his crib, the constant banging against the floor or a wall. John and I would lie in bed at night just listening to this thud, thud, thud.
Thud.
There's nothing. He's now not even noticing his sister who he used to play with. John comes through the front door after work, no recognition that we were his parents or this child even belonged to us. Nothing, nothing, gone.
I mean, that was the time where our boy changed from what he was to a real tragic case of a child who regressed into this autistic state and lost everything. Lost everything.
The CDC, the way that they do research studies is very reactionary. They look at something that's creating a press and creating a buzz that could actually lower vaccination rates, and that's what they study. They don't study vaccines proactively. So if Andy had never done his original study, gotten that published in The Lancet, would have never created the uproar that rightfully it should have created, then the CDC would have never studied this.
Showing that the vaccine safety studies for MMR in particular were lamentable. They were lamentable. There are many, many assumptions have been made about the safety of this vaccine. Going forward, there are going to be questions about what parents should do next. I cannot, in due conscience, support the continued use of the MMR vaccine, having done this research. I said I will continue to vigorously support the use of the single vaccine. All I recommended at that press conference was that parents opt for the use of the single vaccines, single measles, single mumps, single rubella, until the issue had been resolved scientifically. What happened when I made that recommendation, unilateral decisions were made by the government in the UK to withdraw the importation license for the single vaccines, Merck opting in the US to cease the production of the single vaccines, giving parents no option. I said to a senior representative of the Department of Health, why, if your objective is to protect children against serious infectious disease, why would you take away the option of how parents do that? And she said, because if we allowed parents the choice of single vaccines, it would destroy our MMR program. In other words, the concern was for the protection of the program over and above the protection of children.
I'm Mark Blaxell, father of a daughter diagnosed with autism back in 1998. I've written 2 books that have come out of the autism movement, have been projected into autism advocacy ever since. Michaela was born typical, everything was fine, was developing normally through her first birthday. We have vivid memories of early language, joint attention, lots of play. She was adorable, beautiful, cute. And then somewhere in the months after, she began to slip away and she lost language and she began to retreat into a world of her own. And at 2 years, 9 months, we got a formal diagnosis of full syndrome autism. Part of the story we heard from the Harvard experts was autism was genetic, which meant that what people were trying to describe as a genetic, neurologically based condition couldn't be genetic. It could only be environmental. It could only be some set of things that had happened to children. And you had to ask the question, what might it have been?
And that program was aired, and we received 250,000 email hits.
They had never seen anything like this before. The parents had exactly the same story as us. Antibiotics, some were chickenpox, a lot. Vaccine, bang, the symptoms are all the same. The diarrhea, the constipation, the high pitch scream, the banging of the head. We've all lived through it, it's the same story.
And it was Polly's idea to put all of this stuff together in a magazine called Autism File.
Let's all ask the questions and maybe someone can help.
These questions from these parents were not being answered by the doctors that they went to see. They came to us out of desperation, and we had 45,000 subscribers within 4 months.
The first thing that Thompson did was to plot a graph of percentage of children vaccinated against age at first MMR vaccination. The children with autism are represented by the pink line, the children without autism by the blue line. Now, if there's no link between early MMR and autism, those 2 lines should track together, whatever the age at first MMR. Now, they do track together until they get to 15 months. And then they separate, and they continue to separate thereafter. This was their first indication that MMR vaccine was causing autism.
Temple walked at 12 months, so he had been walking for an entire month before we went in for the next set of vaccinations. The minute we walked into the pediatric office, Lou, his twin, she's screaming her head off. I mean, she knows what's going on. She doesn't want the doctor touching her. I look up, and there she's got the shots lined up. 3 for him, 3 for her. By the second shot, Lucinda had flipped herself over. So I had to stop looking at what I was doing, unstrap her, get her out. Well, the minute I get her out and I calm her down a little bit and I look over, he's screaming. I look at the shots and I notice that one of hers was gone. There are only 2 shots left for her. And I asked the nurse practitioner, I said, what happened to that other shot? She says, oh my goodness, I gave it to him. I said, which one was it? She said, it was the other MMR. I said, call the doctor. This baby is screaming his head off. You've given him an extra shot. I don't know what the effects of that's gonna be. We're leaving. And I left. So she never got her shots. I go home, this baby cried. I put him down on his little blanket. He starts banging his head on the floor. Next morning, I go in his room, and he's staring in the space, and he's looking around like this, as if, you know, he's a bit paralyzed. Not the baby who was always doing this every morning and smiling for me to get him out of bed. And I pick him up, and he does this. And I said, what has happened to my baby? So I called the clinic, and I said, I think my child's had adverse reaction to those shots yesterday. She says, no. I'm waiting for a representative from Merck. I don't think it was a reaction to that.
Bill Thompson looked at African Americans. He saw that those African Americans that got the MMR on time were 2.64 times more likely to get an autism diagnosis than those African Americans that received the MMR after 3 years of age.
I take him to see the pediatrician that I know. And she looks at me, she closes the door, and she whispers, she says, Sheila, I believe he has autism. I said, what? Like Rain Man? She says something like that. I'm gonna refer you out to a neurologist. And we go see the neurologist the next week. He says he has every classical symptom of autism. I do not believe this. I was angry. When he was explaining to me what Canner's autism is, he told me he was born that way. I said, no, he wasn't.
Clearly there was a very high risk of autism in African American children. But here's the thing. We know that autism is 4 times more common in boys.
When I looked at African American males only, the relative risk was 3.36. It just blew my mind. And that's when I wanted to call Bill Thompson on the phone. And his statement to me was, oh, you found it.
It appears in the final publication is that race in general is downplayed.
Of course it is.
Temple's twin is amazing. She is fluent in 3 languages. She speaks French like a native. She is an A student. She plays classical piano. With all of the guilt that I feel from that day, one of the best decisions I made for her was to walk out of that office without her being vaccinated. Now am I grateful he's here? You bet. I'm grateful my son lived. But I was so naive that he would live a fulfilling life. He would end up being a happy man, having a family. My dreams for him. And every year that goes by, the older my son gets, the further that dream seems to be.
All about vaccines! So what do vaccines do?
Vaccines build up your immune system and make you stronger to fight off disease.
Are vaccines safe?
Yes, studies involving millions of children have shown no connection between vaccines and autism.
Stick to the schedule.
The CDC's own vaccine schedule, which we are required to adhere to as parents in America, recommends that our children get the MMR between 12 and 18 months. But in this hidden data provided to us by William Thompson, it is clear that for African Americans, this is actually the most dangerous time to deliver the MMR.
I now ask you to step forward to receive your prize from the hands of His Majesty the King.
I am Rick Montagnier, MD. I am a virologist by training. I obtained the Nobel Prize for my contribution to the discovery of the AIDS virus. The vaccine-autism interaction is a worldwide problem, not only in this country, in Europe, but also in Asia, even in Africa. CDC in the past has done a very important work on the discovery of AIDS, so I'm very disappointed to see a different situation with CDC dealing with autism.
When I was working at Merck, I was a sales rep for Vioxx. The whole scandal started when it was discovered that Merck had manipulated data and covered up the fact that Vioxx actually caused twice the amount of heart attacks and strokes than the placebo. What I learned from that experience was just because things are on the market does not mean they are safe. I think we get into a very dangerous territory with vaccinations. If a drug company gets just one vaccine added to the schedule, they can make upwards of $30 billion in 1 year.
It's no secret. I think they've published their intention, which is they want to create an environment of constant vaccination from cradle to grave.
We have a highly profitable product because the safety testing isn't as rigorous as a normal pharmaceutical drug. The gold standard is double-blind, placebo-based, long-term study, and that just isn't done with vaccines because they're classified in a different way as a public health measure. And they haven't been tested in combination with other vaccines. Yet doctors give 6 to 9 doses per visit. It's insane. If pharmaceutical drug was tested like this, it wouldn't be on the market. But because it's a vaccine and the safety testing is less rigorous.
Without a doubt, what's happened to Billy has changed his life.
Yeah, there you go, you got a strike.
What I have on my hands now is a 19-year-old man. He's 6'2". He is volatile. On good days, Billy is brilliant. He's an angel. On bad days, the slightest thing can trigger him, and he's scary.
I'm going to go downstairs and get
Billy,
Daddy now.
You need to stay up here, okay?
I'm going to kill Daddy right now.
Bill, listen to me. I'm going to stay with you up here, and you're going to try and calm down, okay?
The reason they become aggressive and dangerous in some cases is because they have no ability to communicate. That's often when we see the worst part of autism.
Out there, there's millions of me's, there's millions of polytomies with vaccine-damaged children. I am telling you this because I do not want you to live the life that I've led. I do not want you to go through the pain. I do not want to see you suffer or your family suffer. That is why I'm telling you. I have no other reason to tell you about it.
I became interested in autism a long time ago when my best friend at the time had a son who was diagnosed with autism following a DPT shot. He ran a high fever after the shot, seizures a week later, and then was later diagnosed with autism.
We have to accept the fact that autism is new, that before 1930, the rate of autism in the world was effectively 0. And then for a long time, it was 1 in 10,000.
I got interested in studying autism 8 years ago when I saw the numbers go up, and I was quite alarmed because I could see that the trend was exponential growth. And exponential growth is extremely scary.
Since really the mid to late 80s, we've gone from this low prevalence environment to a rate of increase where the trend is still vertical. We have not seen a flattening in trend.
It's every couple of years, the CDC provides a number of what percentage of the kids are diagnosed with autism. And you've got the dots going all the way back to 1975. You draw the line, it is a perfect exponential curve. If we assume that things are going to continue as they have for the past 30 years into the future, we can predict that by 2032, 80% of the boys born will end up on the autism spectrum. Half the children, 80% of the boys.
I'm a single father raising
a 15-year-old, severely autistic, nonverbal teenage daughter. When she was 15 months old, she received a round of vaccines that included the MMR and the DTaP. She developed a high fever. When the fever broke, she lost everything.
My daughter was 6 weeks old when I took her in for her vaccination. 2 hours later, she had a 5-minute seizure, and 2 hours after that, she had another 5-minute seizure.
Mama's here. Come on, come on, come on, you're okay, you're okay. Come on, baby, come on, babe, come on, you can do it. Come on, babe, come on out, come on, baby, come on. Keep breathing, come on, come on, come on, come on.
The vaccination gave her severe brain damage, and she had seizures every day for the rest of her life until she died in my arms at the age of 15.
There is no good reason to choose not to get a vaccine.
He got his MMR and he got his DTP, and within days, he stopped talking.
Projectile vomiting, convulsions.
He went blind in his left eye.
Vaccines took our healthy, happy baby and made him unwell.
She lost all acquired speech.
He lost his speech, he lost his eye contact, like the flick of a switch.
If vaccines were unsafe, I think this would be an interesting and reasonable discussion.
Obviously, some minority get hurt by this stuff. I don't understand why this is controversial.
Vaccines are safe. Get vaccinated.
It's like, you know what? Shut the fuck up and let me take every vaccine that Merck wants to shove down my throat.
Autism is not a side effect of vaccine, or to say it another way, because some people don't hear this well, vaccines do not cause autism.
Hear this well.
Hear this well. Please hear this well.
Hear this well.
Vaccines can and do cause autism.
My grandson,
Daughter Lily,
And my daughter, my son was fully vaccinated.
my son Jackson.
I had a healthy, typically developing boy.
Please hear this well. One day everyone will know the truth about vaccines. Hear this well.
Here's what's really scary. When we look at isolated autism, we see that there's a up to 7-fold increase in the incidence of autism between those that received the vaccine between 12 and 18 months versus those that got it after 3 years old. But let's be perfectly clear. Every child in this study had received the MMR vaccine. What would the numbers be if you compared children who got the vaccine between 12 and 18 months versus children that never got the vaccine at all? This is often referred to as the vax versus unvaxxed study, and the CDC refuses to do this study.
And you in the health field, you who run our health agencies in this country who are sitting here today, you have an obligation to these kids that you just saw there to make sure that these studies are complete, thorough, so that everybody knows that we have all the facts, and you don't have that. It used to be 1 in 10,000. And now it's 1 in more than 250 kids that are being damaged in this country that are autistic. Now, those kids are going to grow up. They aren't going to die. It's not like a lot of diseases where they get infected and they drop dead. They're going to live to be 50, 60 years old. Now, who do you think is going to take care of them? So we can't let the pharmaceutical companies and our government cover this mess up today, because it ain't gonna go away.
People on the IOM move from industry, government, academia, government, industry, and then they bounce around. It's all the same people, and there wasn't a really good policeman in all this to really make sure that the vaccine safety studies are done properly and that they're done objectively. It just didn't seem to me like we were running a system that was credible.
After their brilliant work on the MMR study, DeStefano and his team received an award from the Department of Health and Human Services. And then several years later, Dr. Julie Gerberding received an award of her own, a high-paid job as head of the vaccine division at Merck. Clearly, Merck appreciated the work she had done investigating their vaccine.
I wonder if the CDC has conducted or facilitated a study comparing vaccinated children with unvaccinated children yet. Have you done that?
We have actually done a number of studies looking at the relationship between thimerosal vaccines and autism and other developmental disabilities. vaccines and their components did not increase the risk for autism.
My time's very limited here. So clearly, definitely, unequivocally, you have studied vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
We have not studied vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
Oh, that was, okay, never mind. Just stop there. That was the meaning of my question. You wasted 2 minutes of my time.
In the last 30 years, the childhood vaccine schedule has tripled, while the U.S. autism rate has skyrocketed from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 50. Dozens of published research papers show that, yes, vaccines and autism are linked. Yet the debate rages on, in part because of the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, passed by Congress as a result of pharmaceutical lobbying. It shields drug companies from liability for injuries and deaths caused by the vaccines they manufacture. Vaccines that the federal government admits are unavoidably unsafe. Instead of suing the pharmaceutical company directly, parents are forced to petition the Department of Health and Human Services, and if federal health officials oppose compensation, the case is argued before a special master in the U.S. Claims Court. Many refer to this as vaccine court. Here are some shocking facts about the so-called vaccine court. Pharmaceutical companies do not have to participate in the proceedings at all. Taxpayers pay for all damages.
Beginning in 2002, there were already thousands of cases accumulating in vaccine court, and the average compensation for an autistic child is in the range of $5 million. So just do the math. The government was facing several $100 billion, possibly $1 trillion in liability. As the autism epidemic grew, they had to develop a fraudulent study that would exonerate MMR to deliberately defeat the cases in vaccine court.
A highly contagious measles outbreak.
Major outbreak. Measles outbreak.
Measles on the march in America.
This outbreak is showing no signs of letting up.
But in 2014, the number tripled to 644 measles cases reported in 27 states.
It's really amazing to consider the number of cases of autism every year and to contrast that to, let's say, the number of children who acquired measles by going to Disneyland. It's a tiny number of children who acquired measles, and it's a vast number of children who are being diagnosed with autism every day.
We don't know what causes autism. I mean, that's fair to say. We're not sure as a scientific community what causes autism, but we know that vaccines do not.
It made me question whether or not this organization that's been mandating how I practice medicine for the past 10 years, if they're lying about this or leaving data out about this particular study, what else am I being lied to about?
I'm still trying to digest it because this study, which was used to kind of give the definitive answer to us pediatricians that, oh, the MMR is not related to autism, I kind of feel like I've been lied to. When they set out to do the study, they wanted to look at the data and interpret the data. But then there's a piece of data that they chose to ignore. The data they excluded was really, really significant.
Think about it, it's a big deal. It is a big deal for a physician to have to deal with the fact that for the past 10, 20 years, we've been potentially destroying the brains of children.
Everything I've been telling my patients for the last 10 years has been based on a lie and a cover-up.
Parents making decisions about their children's health deserve to have the best information available to them. They should be able to count on federal agencies to tell them the truth.
Once Brian and I had outed Bill Thompson, he got himself a whistleblower lawyer. He provided all of his documents on the fraudulent CDC study to Congressman Posey, who then went before the Congress.
Considering the nature of the whistleblower's documents, as well as the involvement of the CDC, a hearing and a thorough investigation is warranted. So I ask, Mr. Speaker, I beg, I implore my colleagues on the appropriations committees to please take such action. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
It's now been 7 months since Congressman Bill Posey urged the Congress to subpoena Bill Thompson, and they have done nothing.
Bill Thompson wants to be subpoenaed by Congress. As a CDC employee from the federal government, he cannot speak voluntarily because of the threat of jail time.
Absolutely, William Thompson needs to go before Congress. He needs to go before the whole nation. Everybody needs to see what he has to say.